Welcome to Pro Revenge. I found some wonderful stories to share with you. Hope you guys enjoy. I got some from Reddit and also some subscriber stories. They're probably from older ones, so sorry that it took me long to share these. I'm just starting to pick things up now, so I'm able to get around to reading them. Thank you very much for sharing them. If I haven't shared your stories, just give me some time. More than likely I'll get around to it. So without further ado, I present to you Pro Revenge. Here we go. When I was still in school, I took a job at a bakery. It's one of those bakeries that sell overpriced salads and sandwiches. I worked there for close to a year. Had this boss named Betty. It's not her real name, of course. Betty and I did not get along whatsoever. She got our previous manager fired because they had an affair, and she threatened to tell his wife if he didn't leave. Well, he quickly left the job, and she got promoted to the position. Now, I don't like her, but I have a respect for the dedication that it takes to be a general manager. Unfortunately, she did not respect the position. When I first started working there, I was respectful to her, but she would do things just to get on my nerves. For instance, I would clean all the places I was hired to clean, and once I was done, I would relax for maybe like 5 minutes. She would run out of the manager's office screeching, "Why aren't you working?" I would tell her, of course, that I did my job, and as a cashier, if no one was there, I didn't have anything to do. She would glare at me. Then I would see her accidentally drop an entire pot of brewed coffee on the floor, which was on my freshly mopped floor, and had me clean it again. So I learned pretty quickly to always look busy. Once she realized that I was onto her game, she started dropping my hours. The store seemed to run on a Game of Thrones type politics for who got promoted and who got raises. However, all of her friends were managers, and she would bully the rest of us. She would barely work. She would drive to the job, clock in so that if corporate decided to check her hours, and drive away and be away for a long time, essentially stealing hours from the company. When you clock in, small pieces of paper would fall on the floor. Well, she would just drop them on the floor for me to clean up. I would usually just pick them up and put them in my pocket. So this led to me finding Betty's clock in and putting the stubs in my pocket. This was to my advantage later. Did I also mention that she was super racist? She was white, and most of the staff, which were my fellow high school peers, one day she walked out and told us, "When you're on the clock, I own you." When we all reacted to the look, she backpedaled and said something like, "I didn't mean it like that." This is also important later. So after a while, I got sick of practically begging for hours. So I found another job, but decided merely to just drop my hours with this company, which was barely just a day a week. But suddenly when I got my new job, she scheduled me every single day of the week. She never did that, even when we were on semi-good terms. So I obviously told her that I had a new job and I couldn't do this. So after that, I went home. And I called my friend, who was still working there, and told him that I was going to quit tomorrow. He had a bad habit of putting his phone on speaker when he was doing his cleaning there. So Betty overheard this. The next day that I walk in, I go through the respectful motion of saying, "Thank you for the opportunity to work here," and blah blah blah. Betty let me get through my entire speech before she said, "Oh yeah, I was meaning to tell you, you're fired." I was so blindsided, and I was mad, so I cussed her out. My mom raised me to treat women with respect, but this fat overweight hippo was such a terrible person that it made me mad. She's the type of girl that thinks binge eating is a personality trait, which this well overindulged in. So I left, and I was mad about being fired before I could quit. But I didn't push the issue. I was only 18, and I already had a job. I wasn't expecting Betty to give me a good reference anyway. I would have completely left it alone if it wasn't for my district manager Ben, not his real name, who texted me. Well, here's the revenge. He thought I was still working there, so I explained to him that I was fired. He was stunned. He knew that I was a decent employee. He asked me why she let me go, and I explained it to him, and he got angry. He clarified that she fired me before I quit, and I said yes. He was so mad that she did this. Then he asked if there was anything else that she might have done. I kind of vented to him, I told him about the racist remarks, and he asked if anyone else could back me up on that. I forgot to mention that she slowly fired and forced everyone out and replaced them with friends and family, which according to company policy, she couldn't do. It was a conflict of interest. I asked all the people who worked there that day if they could say what she did, but one did even better. My coworker Andy was convinced that he was the next big vlogger, so he always had his phone out using the audio recorder for hours, so he'd have a chance to catch a funny clip. I did watch his content, and I'd have to say it was super cringy, but it turns out he labeled each recording and the times, so he found one of her making racist comments. I got the brilliant idea of contacting my other coworkers who were forced out or who had quit to corroborate my story, and also encouraged Andy to find all the controversial things she said or just being generally nasty. Like once, a guest sneezed on a baked pastry that wasn't sold. A coworker told her about it and she just laughed it off and said that no one would know, but that wasn't enough for me. I looked her up on Facebook and found out that she was married. No one knew this. So when she had an affair with the other manager, she basically blackmailed him, and she was married all the time, cheating as well. I don't think anyone cared enough to find out, because no one really liked the nasty old cow. So I found the old manager's Facebook, and found out that he was separated from his wife. Turns out that after he quit, Betty still blackmailed him to try to get money out of him. She called his wife anyway, ending up in him getting a divorce. He basically had to move back in with his parents. I did some research in my state about blackmail and extortion, which has a maximum of 7 years in prison, with a fine over $10,000 for the victim. So I told my old manager what my plan was. He agreed to call the cops, and I told him to wait until I was finished, because that wasn't all. I wanted to show him that she was cheating the company by stealing hours. So not only did I give him all the recordings and the written statements from other coworkers, I gave him all the slips of Betty's clock in that showed that she was clocked in for 8 to 10 hours, where she just clocked in and left, which was also recorded by the security cameras. Not only that, he found out through the expense records that she was also stealing money from the company. She was also breaking a lot of health and safety codes, and instead of repairing the equipment that broke, she took that money for herself. Well, this led to a lot of things. Like for one, she was fired immediately, along with all of her minions. It left barely anybody to run the store. They shut it down to clean up the store and to fix the things that she didn't. So now she's out of the job. Mark told her husband and had photo proofs, like nakeds of this fat whale, proving that she cheated on him, and he phrased it like she still was. So Betty's husband flips out, and he divorces her, and he posts every bit of it on Facebook. So she starts begging someone to let her stay with them, but all of her friends and family, finding out what she did, totally bailed on her. So now she's living in her car looking for a job. Mark decided to sue her for extortion. She's scrambling to find a lawyer, and also the company decides to sue her for all the money that she stole and the hours, plus the lost revenue for the store being closed. Her life is ruined now. She had to sell her car for all the legal troubles. Mark told me about bits and pieces of her crying in the courtroom. The last that I heard, she was living with her sister, who definitely hates her. To think this all would have been avoided if she just would have let me quit. This happened back in the mid-90s. My family lived in a log cabin on about 10 acres of land. It was about 10 minutes from town. It wasn't totally in the sticks, but you can definitely hear the banjo music in the background. At the end of our nearly a quarter-mile long driveway is a road that's technically a state highway. In the AM, I drudge myself down there to wait for the bus. And when I get home, I grab the mail and I carry it back until one Monday rolls around and I notice that the mailbox is gone. On closer inspection, it looked like someone ripped it out of the ground. My dad was obviously mad. He went to talk to the sheriff's office, who happened to live a mile down the road. It turns out it's been happening all up and down the road for months. Someone was tossing a chain around the mailboxes and yanking them out of the ground. He suspected a guy down the road. He has a great big lifted 4-wheel drive truck, but he couldn't prove anything. It usually happened around Saturday or Sunday night, and people will find that their mailbox is gone the next morning. And it seemed, the nicer the mailbox, the bigger the target. Many have been hit multiple times. People have tried digging deeper, using more durable wood, etc. This guy would take it as a challenge and rip them out again. It was soft sandy ground, and his truck was a monster. My dad said to himself, "Challenge accepted." Now a bit about my father. He's a steel worker with an engineering degree. He's built like a bear, with 4 arms the size of my legs. Most people who look at him wouldn't think this monster of a man was actually brilliant. But he is. He's the calm and cool type. He almost never loses his temper, but wrong him and God help you. So Dad goes to Lowe's, buys the fanciest, prettiest mailbox they sell. Then he proceeded to install it on top of an 8-foot long cylinder on a 3-inch diameter pipe, hardened steel. But he wasn't done there. After digging down with the post holers, he filled it in with concrete. And to really sell it, he put some wood around the steel so that it looked like a normal mailbox. But despite the appearances, it was now an indestructible mailbox of doom, primed and painted, so that it looked like a standard 4-foot post. My mom even decorated it with flowers and such. He wanted it to be as tempting a target as possible. Didn't even take a week. I went out for school the following morning, and the mailbox was right where it should be. Attached to it was a 30-foot chain, with an entire hitch assembly. It was ripped right off the truck's frame, sheared the bolts. It was marvelous to behold. The sheriff gets called over, and he starts dying laughing when he sees it. He went to the house of the guy that was suspected, and sure enough, they verified the damage on the truck. As a matter of fact, messing with mailboxes is a federal crime. As in, you go to federal prison, not the cushy state ones. My dad was unofficially rewarded by the sheriff's department with a few cases of beer and venison, and after that, every deputy in town would flash him a thumbs up whenever they saw him. This happened a long time ago. My husband and I were freshly married. We were living off base while we were waiting for on-base housing. We owned 2 cars at this point, though that quickly turned into 1 because mine decided to die. And also, the enlisted didn't get a lot of income, so we never replaced it. So that kind of tells you what kind of vehicles we had. 2 clunkers. They were nice enough. We kept them clean and repaired as best we could. We lived in one of those apartments with 4 car spots in front of each building. Exactly enough spots for each apartment to have 2 spots. It was perfect. Even more perfect was the unspoken rule that you only park directly in front of your building. Though it was not enforced, the apartment below us was an older lady. She couldn't drive, so she had no vehicle. She greeted us when we first moved in. She told us that we could park both of our cars in front of the building. She was fine with that. Luckily, we did our best to watch out for her. Our next door neighbor, he owned 1 car, and our neighbor below them owned 2. So all the slots in the front were usually filled with 1 car across. That was if we were all home at the same time. Then in moves this guy in the building next to us. We'll call him DB. DB owned 1 car, but he parked it in 2 spots, directly in front of our building. Not his, but ours. We repeatedly put notes on his car, requesting him to park it where he should. Well, he never listened, so I hatched a plan. But my husband, he wholeheartedly did not endorse it. It wouldn't do any damage to DB's car, but it would render it undrivable. I was positive that it wasn't going to land me in jail because 1, it wouldn't do any damage to DB's car, but it would render it undrivable. It wouldn't cost him anything, but time to rectify it nonetheless. So late one night, after he parked it in 2 spots again, I snuck out, went to the parking lot with the tire gauge. I let out the air from all of his tires. Not enough to damage it, just enough to make it undrivable. Since the air was free, you couldn't still air. So my reasoning was. Also, since I did not damage the tires, something like slashing them, I had not harmed the tires, and my being careful about letting out the air prevented damage to the tire and the rims. And I did all of his tires, so he could not just pop the trunk and replace 1 tire. Then I waited. His schedule was like clockwork every morning. So it wasn't hard to spy on him. From our upstairs window, I saw him discover the altered state of his vehicle. It turned out even better than I planned, because he called the cops. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but most places, it is illegal to park a single vehicle in 2 spots. There are exemptions for wide or long commercial vehicles, but not for a small car. The cop arrived, looked over the vehicle, said there's no damage, and that the air was free, so nothing was stolen. DB would have to fix the issue himself. Then the cop proceeded to write a ticket because DB was parked in 2 spots. DB spent the rest of his carefully timed morning having his car towed and serviced. He really only needed an air pump, so I don't know why he did this. But now, not only that, he has to pay for a parking ticket. He never parked in front of our building again. This happened several decades ago in another state. I lived in an apartment. Usually, you hear your neighbors, but most of the time, people are civilized and they keep the noise at a reasonable level most of the time. Then I got a neighbor with a monster stereo. He probably put serious money into it, since it was high quality. It must have cost hundreds, even thousands. He played it frequently, often repeating the same song again and again. The volume was so loud that my pictures and pottery literally rattled off furniture and walls. And sometimes cups fell out of the cabinet. Normal conversation was impossible. I asked him to turn it down and he would just laugh at me. And he started leaving it on throughout the whole day, even when he was gone. After asking again with no response, I decided to take action. While he was out, I looked in his front window. I saw a rack of equipment with a big amp, an equalizer, a preamp, a tuner, a turntable, and a tape deck. Yes, it's been that long. He had 2 concert-grade loudspeaker towers, each standing around 5 to 6 feet tall. They were back against the common wall. Okay, I got my tape measure and I plotted my revenge. I got the exact location of the equipment rack, especially the power amp. I had a friend who was a ham radio operator and an audiophile. He took RF shielding very seriously, so as not to ruin his equipment. So he explained frequently and thoroughly, enough for me to understand. So I started searching resale shops for used microwave ovens. I hit the jackpot. I found a used commercial unit, which said 1800 watts on the tag. It was kind of pricey, but hey, $35 for silence? That would be worth it. I looked up the specifications for a horn antenna and microwave oven wavelengths, bought some sheet metal, and got to work. After I opened it up, I carefully discharged the HV capacitor to keep from killing myself. I bypassed all the safeties, put aluminum foil over all of my electronic equipment, put the horn against the opposite wall. I put a sheet of foil covered cardboard between me and the gadget. I watched for the neighbor to leave, did a last mental review of my plan, because I had to do it with him out. Because the high power microwaves could cause injury, especially if he walked through the beam. Well, he went out and he drove away. My furniture and windows were dancing with the music because he had it cranked up loud. I waited a few minutes, then plugged in the gadget. There was a loud hum, then sweet, sweet silence. I immediately unplugged it, opened the case, discharged the capacitor, took the gadget to pieces, put the parts in a few boxes, delivered the pieces to 3 different dumpsters, then had no further direct contact with him. I had no indication that he ever figured out that his monster had been attacked by a ray gun, but eventually he had to buy a new system, which was significantly quieter than the monster. Just as a disclaimer, don't try this. It's very dangerous and highly illegal. Plus these days, they probably have better protection. Plus it could start fires, cause vision damage, and they might be able to trace it better. So I say it again, do not try this. For the love of God, respect your neighbors. When I was 17 years old, I was working at a Dunkin Donuts for 2 years. At this point, I had a new manager. He was really cool and easygoing at first. After about 6 months, he started making gross comments to the girls. I heard him say this stuff to a girl who was a couple of years older than me. Stuff like, "Damn girl, you really filled in today." And she would just chuckle nervously. The first time I was on the other side of the store, and I wondered what I just heard. Now this girl, I'd hang out with outside of work, and he would text her, sometimes chatting, with what's not okay. She knew it, but she didn't care. It was her boss, and he wasn't doing anything wrong, at least she thought. This guy had a massive tattoo of his 2 daughters on his shoulder. So that was a big, I feel like I could trust this guy deal, but he started to creep me out. But I genuinely thought I was overreacting. Until one day, after talking to him, I turned around and walked away. He whistled at me, and he said, "Damn!" I turned around and I said, "Please stop. That's not okay." He got angry. I could tell it, but he didn't say anything. The next day I came in, my hourly schedule was changed from 40 hours a week to 25. And that day he said I was on dish duty. His tone was aggressive, as if my dad was reprimanding me. Then he turned around to be Mr. Nice Guy with the other girls. First of all, I had been working there longer than him. I was the one who basically trained him to be a manager. Also, there's no such thing as dish duty, especially at a Dunkin Donuts. The only thing that kept that day going for me was the usual customers. They came in wondering where I was, and the manager would tell them I was in the back. Little did he know, I knew these customers very well. To the point, when I saw them pull into the parking lot, I'd already start their usual coffee order and have it ready before they got in. And it saved the customer a lot of time. So they got in the habit of leaving their house a couple of minutes later. So when they walked in, they didn't have to wait. But seeing this, they got pretty upset. I get home frustrated because basically, my boss cut my hours in half and forced me to wash dishes because I didn't have the reaction he wanted after he whistled at me. This was not gonna work, so I called the Dunkin Donuts corporate number. I told them everything, and I said I didn't know what else to do, and they said they'd handle it. The next day, we're all working. Me in the back again. A corporate looking guy comes in, and he says the manager's name, and they asked him if he can sit and talk. It was two guys, a corporate guy, the guy who owns the Dunkin Donuts in our town, and my manager, sitting at a table in the lobby area. Naturally, I have to see what's going on. Was it because I called Corp yesterday? So I go stand at the register, right in front of the table. I see my manager, and he looks over at me, and with my eyes, I am screaming a big "F you," hoping that I could teleport my thoughts to him. About 10 minutes later, they all stood up. The manager walks out right there. The guys come up to the register and ask if I was working. I said that was me. The corporate guy said it was the right thing calling them, and that he would not be coming back, and they wanted me to be the replacement. So I ended up being the manager. Thank you very much for joining me for Pro Revenge. I hope you guys like these stories. 2 of them were subscriber stories. I want to give a big thanks to them for sharing their stories. I don't know how long it's been since I received these, so I do apologize for how long it took. If you're listening to this, that is. Thank you all for joining me. Please like, share, and comment, especially comment. I love reading them. And if not, subscribe for more content. I try to at least do 2 videos a week. I think I'm going to add a 3rd if it hasn't already came out. This might be the 3rd video this week. Depends on if I have it done already. We'll see how that goes. Thank you very much to my patrons. If you want to become a patron, $1 a month, you can get advanced audio broadcast. You can download it and listen to it anytime you want. A lot of the times it's like a week in advance. Thank you all for joining me, and until next time, this is Dallas, signing off.